So what's going on, guys? Welcome everybody to another video on the channel. Hope you all are having a good day. So in this video, we are going to be ranking every single gun in Black Ops Cold War Zombies from worst to best. Now, I have been experiencing pretty much every single weapon in this game and either ranking them up or just using them for general gameplay purposes. And I decided that it would be good to put together an entire comprehensive list of every weapon in the game and explain how effective they are, if at all. And then some of the best guns that I recommend you invest in and start utilizing in your games. This should give you a pretty comprehensive view of the entire weapon arsenal in Cold War Zombies right now. Obviously, this list is going to change in the future due to patches or buffs or even new additions of brand new weapons, so I should also make pretty clear my parameters for judging these weapons in Cold War Zombies. Obviously, the way that weapon rarity works, I realized pretty quickly it would be nearly impossible to rank each individual gun based on its rarity, so for the sake of this video, we're going to be assuming that all weapons ranked are of the same rarity, just to keep it simple and so that everything makes sense. It's also important to keep in mind that there are some guns in the game that are particularly good in certain scenarios, but I'm also going to be ranking these just on general gameplay purposes, so that means like just using it to kill zombies or to play high rounds or to even do Easter eggs. The main backbone of this ranking is its overall well-rounded effectiveness. So just so we're clear and that's out of the way, if you guys enjoyed today's video, all I'd ask in return is a thumbs up. That would be awesome, and definitely subscribe if you are new to the channel, as around 90% of you guys are not currently subscribed. A lot of new people have been finding the channel recently, so I want to welcome you if you are brand new, and make sure to stick around for more zombies videos. But without further ado, guys, let's get into this absolute mammoth of a ranking. Coming today all the way at the bottom, worst spot on the list is going to have to be the RPG. So again, the RPG has never really been effective in zombies in any iteration and in almost any form whatsoever. The fact that there's no explosive perk in this game that protects you from that damage also makes it a little bit lower tier, but the RPG really just doesn't get a lot done for what it should. You know, it's big, it's bulky, it's annoying. It doesn't put out as much damage as you might think, and again, there are like certain ways to abuse the RPG that make it maybe pretty effective, but like again, I just think there's better options. I don't think there's anybody out there defending the RPG as the best gun in the game. Like if you are, that's absolutely insane. RPG probably has to be the worst gun in the game. Coming in at our next spot, just above the RPG, we have the China Lake or the M79, and I would say that this is one of the most frustrating weapons to get camos for. I've seen an outcry from gamers in the comment section or on Twitter that this is nearly impossible to get camos for, and it's not very good at all. You have to reset your game multiple times because the damage falls off pretty dramatically, and it's just really not effective for almost anything, whether you're playing Easter eggs or high rounds. I think it was purposely invented to be a bad gun, and that's fine. Like I'm for having like good and bad weapons in the box, and this just happens to be one of the poorer weapons. Coming in just above that, we have the M82 Sniper, or the Barrett. Now, it's a shame I'm putting it this low on the list because in older zombie games, this gun was actually pretty good, and it's a shame it's not that effective in Cold War Zombies. There are sniper rifles that are not the Barrett that are significantly more effective for almost any purpose. It just doesn't do enough damage, and granted, it's not a bolt action, so you can fire it pretty rapidly, but it just is not very good in almost any circumstance. Like, I can't recommend you play this gun, and I really don't have a use for, and that's kind of the problem. I think if they buff the damage, it would be a little bit more effective, but as it is, not very good. Moving on, coming in just above that, I can't believe I'm putting this above a sniper, but the Sigma Launcher. Again, pretty low tier as a weapon just as it stands, but it does have like a few nice quirks, or like it is pretty effective in taking out boss enemies, and if you're able to direct impact, it does a pretty decent amount of damage. Nothing honestly wild or anything, but like, you know, it's a launcher. It is what it is. Not great, but you know, it's certainly better than the other launchers that we compared it to. Moving on, next we have the Pelington sniper rifle, and it's unfortunate, like I kind of like this weapon, it's fun to play, but there are other snipers that just deal more damage and are more effective in virtually every scenario more than the Pelington, and it's just not a gun that's very popular or that you play a lot. There's not a lot of reason to run it. It's not a bad gun necessarily. There's really just no incentive to actually take this from the box and invest your points and your scrap and upgrading it, because it's not going to give you as much return that you would get from, let's say, another sniper rifle. Again, not completely terrible, but severely outclassed by other weapons in the game. Next up, we have the Diamatti pistol, which is very similar to the RK5 or the RK7 Garrison in Black Ops 4. It's a 3-round burst pistol, and it comes in either a single variant or dual wield, and I gotta say, it's really not that bad. It's not a standout gun or anything, but I actually quite like getting this in dual wield, and if it's a very high rarity on a low round, it's pretty gnarly. Like, it's not bad at all. It's not a gun that I love, and I think there's definitely better options, but it's not horrible. Next up after that, we have the 1911 pistol, and it feels kind of weird putting this at like almost our lower to mid tier, because usually if you've played zombies in the past, this was generally the worst weapon in the game. That's what many players know it as. It's the gun you start out with, and it's completely normal and reasonable to automatically just think that the 1911 in terms of zombies context is still the worst gun in the game, but that is not the case in Cold War Zombies. It's been entirely rebalanced to where it's actually pretty viable. Per shot, the damage is higher than you might expect. But again, at the end of the day, when you compare similar rarities to other versions or other classes, it's just, it doesn't really hold a candle in terms of its overall practicality. Pretty fun in its own right, but definitely not any all-star player. Up next, we have the Mark 14 DMR, and I guess the only way for me to describe this weapon in one word, condensed, is just disappointing. Like, first time I used this, I maybe just thought I had a low rarity or something. It doesn't do a lot of damage like you would expect it to for a DMR that is a single shot. It doesn't have an incredible magazine or a fire rate or anything, and per bullet, like, again, the damage is higher than something like a pistol, but it's really not impressive at all. Like, honestly, it could have been made a lot better. It's more similar to like the Mark 14 from older zombie games. It's more true to that way, but yeah, it's not very effective. Even when pack-a-punched, I wouldn't really recommend it. Pretty mid-tier as a weapon. Again, not a terrible choice, but I just personally don't really like it that much, nor think it's effective. Coming in just above that is a very similar weapon, the Type 63, or otherwise known as the Gewehr. So this weapon, again, I'm pretty disappointed with overall in its effectiveness in zombies. During the multiplayer alpha, this gun was literally the greatest weapon in the entire game, and it sucks to see. This weapon has pretty much been completely nullified as far as zombies goes, and it's, again, pretty similar to the Mark 14, where it's just, there's better options, right? It doesn't put out a lot of damage relative to how hard you have to try with this weapon to make damage, I guess. So it's not something I can say I recommend either. Again, not horrible, but pretty mid-tier. Coming up next, we have a pretty solid choice, and getting into our true mid-tier weapons is the KSP-45. Now, I originally ranked this a lot higher when I had an initial impression of this game, and it's a burst fire SMG, which you kind of have to be, like, into those kind of guns to even appreciate this one to begin with. It's got really, really high damage for what it is, but I think its biggest weakness is that it's not good at any range whatsoever, and the fall-off is quite dramatic. It's pretty good for boss zombies and being able to space them out and everything, but I think that it's, again, pretty situational and doesn't really cover all of its bases, but again, pretty mid-tier. Up next after that, we have the Magnum, and honestly, I'm pretty impressed with how this weapon behaves in Cold War Zombies. And very similarly to every other pistol, this can come in a single version, or you can have this akimbo and dual wield, and depending on how much damage you want to put out, you might have to sacrifice a little bit of accuracy. Honestly, as far as the Magnum's concerned, I think having one is better, because being able to aim down the sights with this and be absolutely precise is a little bit more valuable, in my opinion, than just putting out raw damage. Whereas the dual wield on the Diamatti is actually pretty good. I think I'm going to recommend the single pistol if you're going to be using the Magnum. I just think the precision is more valuable than anything. Coming in just above that, we have the knife, and it sounds so weird putting this literally above the Magnum, but as a lot of you guys know, the knife is probably one of the best starting weapons in the whole game, if not the best one. It's going to carry you all the way through the early game to like turn on power and demachine and like basically get you your initial setup to where you're actually running weapons. And if you do choose to invest in your knife, upgrading its rarity and even pack-a-punching it, it absolutely manhandles boss enemies. Like, it's really, really surprising. And so I would say that the knife, if you actually use it just as a secondary, it's a very reliable choice for point building. It's pretty excellent, but again, it is very limited in terms of its range of use, as it is only a knife, you know, so it only goes so far, but it is pretty good for the early game in all intents and purposes. Coming in just just above that, we have the MP5, and I honestly don't have a lot to say about this weapon, and that's not because it's not good or anything. I actually think it's very solid as a choice, but it doesn't have like any special quirks in my opinion, right? It doesn't have like an insane amount of damage. Its fire rate is pretty modest, and it's just like the most vanilla or like base version SMG. Again, very, very reliable in that sense, but it doesn't have anything crazy. Even when you pack-a-punch it, it becomes like, you know, what you would expect. It's a better version of the MP5, and there really isn't too much other to say about that, but it is an incredibly solid weapon, so I will give credit where it's due. Coming in just above that is basically the AR equivalent to the MP5 we just talked about. This is the QBZ, and it's really weird. Like, it's one of the most unpopular ARs in the game. Not because, again, it's not effective or it's not good, but just because I don't believe it's a wall buy anywhere, so it's relatively hard to obtain if you're just trying to get it from the mystery box, but also just like in terms of other ARs, it's a little bit outclassed in almost every regard. It doesn't have a fire rate to write home about, you know, it's not an insane amount of damage that it outputs, and it's pretty just middle of the pack. The best thing to say about it is that it's generally the most well-rounded weapon in the game. You know, it can get anything done. You can use it for any purpose you need to accomplish. Coming up next, we have the AK-47 assault rifle, and so this is, again, actually one of the better guns in the game, but the problem is it suffers from a low rate of fire. The damage output is very, very good, like, especially when you're shooting boss enemies with this, it will absolutely chunk their health down, but the AK, even when upgraded, doesn't have an amazing rate of fire. If we even had double tap 1.0 in this game, it would severely help the AK-47 out a lot, and it also suffers from pretty high recoil, so I understand why this weapon isn't as popular as it could be. Very solid as just a sheer damage output if you can handle it, but other than that, I think that there are better AR choices, but a true mid-tier weapon. Up next is basically what I would say is the LMG equivalent to the AK-47. This is the RPD, and to be quite honest with you, I don't love the LMGs in this game, and that's not to say that they're not strong, because they certainly are, and there are LMGs that are phenomenal choices, but I don't know if the RPD is one of them. The biggest disadvantage you get with LMGs is their decreased movement speed, and if that's something you value in this game, then LMGs aren't really for you. They do overcompensate with the unbelievable amount of damage that they output, but if that's not something that you particularly need at the moment, I really wouldn't recommend them, and I certainly wouldn't recommend the RPD as much because it kind of suffers the same problems as the AK, but other than that, a really, really good weapon, and even in the early game, absolutely phenomenal. Coming in just above that, we have the AK-74U SMG, and this weapon is still in our mid-tier, but getting ready to like crack into that higher echelon of weapons, and the best thing about the 74U is that it's very fast, it's very nimble, it puts out a surprising amount of damage for what it is, and it's basically everything the AK-47 is not. In my opinion, it also sees a very significant glow up after you pack-a-punch it, and its rarity greatly defines how effective this weapon may or may not be. 74U is pretty much something I always take whenever I get it out of the box in an early game when I'm setting up and trying to get the guns that I actually want. Again, not the best gun in the game by any means, but very, very good choice. Moving on to our next weapon on this list, we have the Bullfrog SMG, or what is otherwise known as the PP Bison, and this weapon is pretty special. It doesn't really behave like any other SMG that we currently have in Cold War Zombies. In my opinion, the Bullfrog is the truest cross between the SMG class and the AR class. It sort of hits like an assault rifle, but it has the mobility and speed and nimbleness of an SMG. While the gun might look aesthetically really weird and strange, you cannot deny the reliable amount of DPS that this thing will output. I've actually seen this as a pretty popular starting weapon for a lot of players just because of its reliability, and more than anything, it really hits even on lower rarities. So if you haven't yet tried out the Bullfrog or invested in it in your game, give it a go and see what you think, because I actually think it's a pretty higher tier weapon if I'm being honest. Coming in at our next spot, we have the XM4 or the Commando, and while it is admittedly one of the like most starter pack weapons in the entire game, it's usually the one that most people are going to load in with to begin with, as that's just what it gives you. That's not to say that the weapon is not good. When you have the correct attachments on this, and when you pack a punch it enough times, this is probably one of the like most reliable choices in the game. It has virtually no recoil. Its damage output, while isn't anything insane, is very, very solid. It behaves a lot like the original Commando from Black Ops 1, and if you've played that game at all, then the XM4 is going to feel very familiar to you, and also its just effectiveness in game is going to be virtually the same. Coming in just above that, we have the Tundra, which is quite literally the best weapon as far as the sniper rifle category, and while admittedly maybe it isn't the most practical gun in the game, when upgraded correctly and with the right set of perks and used in the right situation, this gun can deal over 1 million damage per bullet, and so you can do some pretty insane numbers with that Tundra, and if that's something you're looking for, then it's certainly going to get the job done. And again, while I can't recommend it over some of the weapons above it on this list, I believe it is inarguably probably the best sniper rifle in all of Cold War Zombies right now. Coming up next, we have the Milano SMG, which may or may not be a surprising pick, but I would actually say is my favorite SMG in the game as of right now. And despite its glaringly obvious flaw, which is its pretty slow rate of fire, that doesn't stop it from being an absolutely amazing choice as a weapon to begin with. I think that when just using context and primarily relying on hip fire for the Milano's usage is probably where it's going to shine the most. It doesn't deal as much damage as most of the ARs in the game, and in terms of that is like kind of underpowered. It doesn't do like a ton to boss enemies, at least in my experience, but it's one of the safest guns to play in my opinion. And what I mean by that, it's like you can have so much mobility firing from the hip, you can move around and maneuver and still put out very reliable damage that it's never a bad choice for that. Coming up next on our list, we have the FFAR, or otherwise known as the FAMAS from older games, and I would say that the performance of the FFAR in Cold War Zombies is very comparable to how the FAMAS was in older zombie games. And a lot of you will remember that the FAMAS was great even when pack-a-punched. Its biggest flaw and the worst thing about it was that it ran out of ammo unbelievably quickly. And in Cold War Zombies, while that is still kind of the case with this weapon, it does run out of ammo kind of quickly. It's very easily replaceable, either from ammo boxes or just obtaining max ammos. So you pretty much will always have bullets for this. And again, its performance and its DPS is very similar to the FAMAS, which I am incredibly happy to report. Great gun, and definitely in one of our higher tier weapons. Coming in next on our list, we have the AUG, and comparatively to the FFAR or the FAMAS from other games, the AUG is also pretty similar, although I would say that it behaves a little bit differently in this game. You are definitely going to want to be going for headshots more importantly, and I know that sounds obvious, but like for the AUG, it's especially important. It also sees a significant boost in its overall capability after pack-a-punching it, and is probably one of the rarer rifles to get in the game, but all the worth it, especially while you're setting up, and it'll take you through high rounds. You can play the Easter egg with it. Very practical and very, very effective. Now up next, we have the Krig 6 AR, and otherwise known as the Galil. So this is probably what, in my opinion right now, is the best AR in the game. Now that does not include some of the other tac rifles, which we'll get to, but as far as the AR class is concerned, I believe the Krig 6 is going to be the best. After playing some high round games with it fully upgraded and at its highest rarity, I've come to the conclusion that this weapon is usually able to sustain its damage output for the longest comparatively to the other assault rifles, and again, it does have some damage drop-offs pretty significantly in some of the higher rounds, but it's able to last the longest, and as far as I'm concerned, that has to give it a very high spot. Absolutely amazing choice for a weapon, and highly recommended if you have not already played it. Up next on our list, and getting into the upper echelon of weapons, we have the M60 LMG, and just the sheer damage output on this is honestly unbelievable. I really cannot comprehend how quickly this melts bosses. And again, the biggest downside to these LMGs are your decreased movement speed, and of course reload time is really something that is gonna hurt you a little bit. So speed cola is pretty much required if you're gonna be playing one of these guns, but is one of the best tools in terms of taking out bosses and doing that from a safe distance. Coming in just above the M60 though has to be the Stoner 63, and literally this gun is an absolute tank. It is a unit of a weapon, and so the best thing about the Stoner is that it has all of that capability and just sheer amount of raw damage like an LMG is supposed to have, but it almost has like the versatility, mobility, and reload speed, to be quite honest, as like an AR does, or maybe slightly longer, but still it has like almost all of the weaknesses that LMGs typically have erased from it, and it's easily the best LMG if you ask me. I will say, however, fully upgraded speed cola is almost a requirement if you're going to be playing this gun or also the M60, but definitely if you have those available, then these are going to be greatly of benefit to you. However, better than the LMGs, coming up next on our list, we have the M16, and I don't think there's going to be really anyone that disagrees that this gun isn't just an absolute shred monster, right? It is probably the gun that surprised me the most how good it was, and especially it's the standout pick as far as the tactical rifle class goes. goes. Again, it behaves a little bit more like a traditional AR, but even in higher rounds, it shreds through entire trains of enemies. And I would also argue that it's just one of the most satisfying guns to use. It can be acquired off the wall pretty early in your game and upgraded with relative ease. And it's, again, reliability and its effectiveness sustains even through like rounds 30, 40, even 50 sometimes. So the M16 is truly one of the most god tier weapons in Cold War Zombies right now, and I don't expect that to change anytime soon. Moving on to our highest tier weapons, or getting up there, is the Ffar shotgun, and I don't even need to explain this weapon really. I can let the gameplay speak for itself, and I can also probably let your guys' experience speak for themselves as well. Like, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody who says that the Ffar shotgun in Zombies, in the right context and fully upgraded and everything, isn't a good weapon. It's great for Easter eggs. It's probably one of the most reliable weapons if you're going to be speedrunning just as like a sidearm or your primary weapon. It's great for high rounds as it sustains damage, pretty high up. It absolutely decimates any boss zombie that happens to come across it, and you can upgrade it relatively early. So I would say that the Ffar shotgun, its only downside is the fact that it is pump action, and if it's anything like our next shotgun, it could be made a little bit better, but its damage output is unreal. And next on our list, you all know the shotgun I was referencing. This is the Gallo shotgun, or the Spaz 12, and I don't think this really needs much introduction. Again, the gameplay will speak for itself, and also just how you use it in game. The sheer amount of people running this weapon, if you watch like somebody's stream or a YouTube video, and just how often you see it, should be a good indicator of how undeniably effective this weapon is. It just, again, similar to the Ffar, it really doesn't have any weaknesses when it's upgraded. Shreds boss enemies is unbelievable damage when you hit critical headshots. It's also one of the first guns that you have the opportunity to buy in the game as a blue off the wall. Once you get near Juggernog, it's pretty much the go-to choice for setting up any game on D Machine, so there's almost no reason not to grab it. And as far as regular bullet guns in this game, I actually think that this is still the best weapon out of all of them. Now, we're going to rank the wonder weapons somewhat separately, although I guess you could include it in this list. I'm going to rank all 4 elementals of the wonder weapon also. Coming in at the lowest tier elemental upgrade of the wonder weapon has got to be the fire version, or the thermophasic upgrade to the shockwave. So I think the biggest problem is that it kills zombies and it will do that job, but it has a very significant trigger delay, and it's not at all a panic weapon. And I just don't think you get a lot of bang for your buck in terms of what you need to upgrade it and how much ammo it has. I just don't think it gets a lot done, and it's certainly not better than the original version. After the fire, we have the ice build, and I quite like using this one. Honestly, it's a lot of fun, but is it practical? I'm not really sure. Its ammo is a little bit short-lived, admittedly. It behaves very similarly to, I believe it is the Cryo Freeze from Infinite Warfare Zombies. It was a weapon that was obtainable via tickets in that game, and if you're familiar with that at all, then this weapon is going to be quite familiar to you, and you're going to know immediately how to use it. But again, I think it runs out of ammo rather quickly, and it doesn't kill maybe as fast as I'd like it to. It can get a little messy by freezing zombies, so it's okay. Up next, we have the poison upgrade, and I quite like the concept of this one. I'm a big fan of these like lingering area of effect damage wonder weapons, like the ice staff, for example, or the lightning bow, and this is kind of the same thing. The problem is the damage drop-off is very significant, and it is not viable for high rounds. If it was, I think it would probably be the best gun in the game, but unless they change it, it just really isn't effective anywhere past like 30. And then after the poison upgrade, we have the electro bolt, the electricity upgrade. I think that this is the best out of the elementals, and the reason for that being you get more bang for your buck as far as ammo is concerned, certainly more than the ice one, although their like overall effects are quite similar. It's very fun to use as well, and it completely melts zombies, and so I think this is probably the best out of the elementals, but I still believe that the DIE Shockwave, the original version of the wonder weapon, is still going to be the best choice out of all of the upgrades, quote unquote. So coming in today, though, at the highest spot on this list, the #1 best gun in the game is still the reigning king, the ray gun. And even, again, despite its nerfs that it's seen, a lot of you haven't played the pre-patch version of this, but for those of you who did, it was a literal nuke. And even after that patch, its effectiveness hasn't changed that much. This is still the gun that you want either for the Ring of Fire strat if you're going to be playing 2 round 100 that way, or if you're going to be training, it's the gun that you're going to take 2 high rounds. And again, great for early game. I don't need to explain the ray gun. You know, you guys know how sick it is pulling this out of the box and how excited you get, which is just like a feeling I've missed for a long time in zombies, and it feels so good to get the ray gun again because it is so unbelievably effective comparatively to all the other weapons. So this is going to be my list of all of the guns in Cold War Zombies ranked from worst to best. Let me know what you guys thought about it. Do you agree with my list? Do you disagree? Let me know what your particular favorite gun is down below in the comment section. If you guys did enjoy today's video though, before you leave, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, as this did take a very long time to make. I'd appreciate it a lot. Be sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel for more videos like this, and we are getting so unbelievably close to 400k already, which is unreal. And then also, if you guys don't already follow me on Twitch, I stream zombies nearly every day. Link to that is in the description below if you want to come say hi and hang out. It's a great place to be, and I would love to see you over there. But anyways, hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you for watching once again, and I'll see you guys in the next stream or the next video. Take it easy, and peace out.